Hey everybody, Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast.
They demand my alter ego, but I won't go.
On today's show, we have Ricky Roberts III, who, if you are from St. Pete or the St. Pete area, there's a good chance you've seen him on social media. He is I'm going to probably get a lot of this wrong and you can correct me, but he's somewhat of a motivational speaker. He's a skateboarding enthusiast. He's written a number of books. I just read is this your most recent book? Thank you, Skateboard?
Yeah, that's number 8.
I mean, you've written quite a few. I was looking at the end here. This is what, book number 6 or 7?
That's 8, actually.
Wow. Yeah, so starting in 2004, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's impressive.
Thank you.
I was trying to reflect back, and I was talking to you just before you got on the show about how I became, how I knew about you, and I think it was Harold McCaslin, who I grew up with over in St. Pete. Said,
Did you really?
Yeah, we went to high school together and played football together. And
Dude, we had to have met or at least skated together or something, because I knew Harold mostly I met him in middle school at Riviera.
Okay.
And skateboarded with him and Rob Croft, Rob Palo, all those guys.
I remember Rob Palo too.
So then they went to Northeast. I went to Bogey and then Gibbs. So I kind of
my dad taught at Bogey, but I think he probably would have been done at Bogey before you were there.
Okay.
He taught biology.
Okay.
Well, so I went to St. Pete High my first 2 years, and my parents were school teachers. So if you know anything about school teachers, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, their combined income was like maybe 20 grand or something like that.
Right.
So St. Pete was somewhat of a culture shock for me, because it was all the Snell Isle and Shore Acres and kind of the wealthy kids. And, I felt like a fish out of water there when I was there. And my dad at that point was teaching at Northeast. And because he taught there, even though I wasn't zoned for there, I was able to transfer over. And
nice.
I felt like I fit in a lot better at Northeast than I did at St. Pete High. But yeah, well, we can talk about Harold in a minute, because Harold's a whole other story in himself.
Amazing. Just a remarkable musician. And he's always just been one of those people that you can't help but to respect and love,
He's had an interesting life, know, and he's a tough kid. And yep. He's gone through a lot in his life, and he's doing really well right now, which makes me happy. Are you St. Pete originally?
Yep.
All right. So
raised.
Riviera, I could probably, if I thought hard enough about it, rattle off 20, 30 names that I'm sure you know. We've got to be then about the same age. I'm going to be 45 next month.
Oh yeah, well I turned 44 in September.
Okay, yeah, so we're
we
right
were
there.
Definitely rubbing shoulders in the circles back then.
Now there wasn't any skate parks back in that day. I remember it was. I always hung out at Reno Beach Surf Shop, or John Reno, whatever version of a shop he had. He used to have one on 9th Street, then it moved over to 4th Street, and then he became more surf stuff. But that was the place to get decks and skateboards when I was a kid. And then there was a place in Tyrone Mall. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
There was that. I forget that. Good Vibrations?
Good Vibrations.
And then there was the Allen Sports Center on Seminole Boulevard, started to carry boards. Then Sundance opened up eventually, and that was the spot. There was Mad Beach. Yeah, Mad Beach out on the beach. But back then, if you didn't live on the beach, you weren't really going out there.
Yeah, that seemed like light years away when I was a kid.
Yep. And as far as skate spots or parks, definitely no parks. There was those DIY starting up, maybe that Shackleton spot. There was random.
There was an abandoned gas station. What's the big bank that's there on 9th Street, like right before 22nd Avenue? That big, the big cylinder that's kind of like an inverted cone.
Yeah.
So just north a block from there was this gas station that was abandoned forever, and I remember we would just be in that thing all hours of the night. It was just like setting up old signs against the walls, and just like I said, all you do it yourself. It's better then,
Good stuff, man. That was good times. We would meet at Harold would sometimes do it. We would meet at Riviera in the morning at like 7 a.m. before teachers and stuff got there, so we could skate the stairs out front.
Right.
And then like eventually teachers would start coming in. Some would be cool with it. Ultimately, we would get asked to stop, but And then did you ever skate the slab at Northeast Shopping Center? It was that old, it was just a concrete slab in the middle of the parking lot that was pretty much a place they left us alone.
There was actually a pool where I think the Fresh Market is now. There was a pool that was
that closed hotel thing?
There was a pool. I remember going there and watching people skate the pool.
Yep.
Crazy. So, God, I'm trying to think about Harold as a skater because I never knew him as a skater. But
he shredded.
Well, he had that crazy switch. Like he had that thing that you just flick it and there's no stopping him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's awesome. So this book, Thank You Skateboarding, is amazing. I'm pretty much finished it, but I kind of want to go through it a little bit since it's your most recent book and it kind of has bits and pieces of your life in it. So
I love it.
As I understand it, you've got a number of siblings.
Yes. Yep.
How many?
I have three brothers and 2 sisters. One of which passed away from an overdose. But 2 sisters, 3 brothers. Okay.
Now, Ricky the third. Who were the first 2? Your dad and your grandpa, or does it go further back than that?
Yeah, and actually, like, the third came to me a little bit later in life, where I really started to use it. I was always just Ricky Roberts, and then it got to a point where it was my way to stand on my own identity, kind of separate myself a little bit from those that came before me.
You talk about your dad a little bit in the book, and kind of a interesting history there with your father. So I would imagine that has been something that has kind of turned you into who you are today. For better or for worse. Now, your Roberts, is that just WASP? Is that English? What's the?
I have no idea, really.
Okay.
I do, like, the most I know is some Native American heritage, from on I think my dad and mom's side both. I know my great grandfather was 100% Cherokee, and then there was another Indian tribe on the other side. So,
oh, wow, that's very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Definitely some Cherokee there.
Where did you fall in the lineup of siblings? Oldest, youngest, middle?
Second oldest.
Okay.
I had one older brother. Just to backtrack a little bit about my father, that was something he left when I was younger, and he was making his choices and just trying to get through life at that stage in his life, young with 6 kids, trying to figure it out. Made some bad decisions, and he was gone for a long time, and that created a lot of anger and hostility in me, and for many different reasons. And that's a whole nother path that I went down with projecting that anger and hurt. And ultimately, he came back around. So it was this really like season of anger, rage, making bad decisions myself, and having to like go through some things to really wake me up. And then he came back when I was, in my early 20s, and that was like a perfect transition into opening up to my healing, dealing with stuff, like starting to work on myself. And then I had to go through that mode of forgiveness, which was an amazing journey just to work through and get to a place where someone that was at the root of so much pain could then be someone that I could, have that peace in my heart with, so that was a great experience overall, and not easy, and when you're talking about forgiveness, I always tell people it's not always about forgetting or saying that it was right for what someone did. It's just freeing yourself from some anger or resentment that you could be carrying in your heart,
Right. I'm becoming more and more aware of this because a colleague of mine said you need to stop talking about yourself so much. So I'm going to try and not do it quite as much. But my dad passed in 2018, and he was a hero of mine. But in the later years of his life, he was very much he had issues with alcohol and some other things. And he was not a violent person. He wasn't a mean or an angry person, but I just think he carried around a lot of depression, and that's how he treated it, was with alcohol. And there was a lot of judgment that I had for him in the last 10 years of his life. But when he passed away, that all went away. And, one of the things that kind of popped into my head is just how tough life is. And
yeah, man.
It's very difficult to judge what people do to get through it. It's easy at the time, but in retrospect, it's like no one gets out alive. It's man. Tough. You're not guaranteed, an ascent. It's very often a descent. Yeah. And, people get through it however they can. And as long as they're not like hurting other people or, right. It's hard for me to judge. So when I lost him, I was very much kind of not forgetting, but forgiveness and just saying, he did the best he could and that's okay. And so I hear what you're saying about your dad and kind of the changing perspective on your relationship with him.
And to speak to that, life thing is in judging other people, that's the truth. Life's crazy. It's hard. And to think that you could do better in someone else's shoes is hard. It's a hard thing to like claim because you don't know what it's like. And along over the years, I've really tried to put myself in that position of, my mother and father, both of them made some bad decisions that affected me and all of my siblings, and a lot of dysfunction and abuse. But when I look at it and think, I don't know how good I would have done in my 20s with 6 kids and like trying to deal with my own like darkness and get through anxiety and depression or whatever it might be. So it's important, I think, in any situation to look at with some level of compassion and understanding. And again, not to say that it's right, because there are things that are just absolutely wrong that you can't overlook. And I'd say not to forget about it, but the compassion always helps.
Right. Now, you mentioned your sister passed. Are your parents still alive, or?
Yeah. They're both still alive.
Are you in contact with them at all, or?
I'm in contact with my father more so than my mother at this point, which is interesting. But as you get older, I think that you realize your responsibility to create boundaries for yourself and standards, and regardless if people are family or not, if they continue to treat you in a way or do things that make you feel less than good, I think it's our responsibility to keep that space for our own well-being.
That's a good point. The boundary thing is one that I came to late, because you can have an ability to take on weight that isn't yours. You can have an ability to feel guilt for not helping those that you love when it's not really your job to do that. Again, I had this guilt about feeling like I should be the one to be able to pull my father and my mother out of their drinking, and I should be the one to be able to fix this problem. And the fact that I could never do it for the longest time, I had such a heavy heart, because it was like, I was an only child. So I was like, if it's not going to be me, who's going to do it? Yeah. And at some point along the way, actually through a lot of therapy, I learned it's like, it's not your job to fix everybody's problem. It's not your job, that's be there for them. If they ask you for help, you can help them, but you're not the architect of everyone's, being saved. So you gotta, and I don't mean that in a religious way, just in general. So no, the boundary thing is quite important, quite a big catharsis in the last couple of years.
And I, and to chime in with that, I can appreciate that feeling, because I felt that way with, and I feel that way to some extent with all of my siblings, and I just want them to do well and do good and kind of heal from some of their wounds, wounded child stuff. But my sister, that was a perfect example. That is, she'd read some of my earlier books, which is more like inspirational life journey, kind of self-help journey stuff. And I would have multiple talks with her in any way that I would talk with other people that I would try to help through different initiatives that I've had in my life with work. But when she passed away, I carried that guilt heavy. Like, it hit me hard. I processed, like in my 5th book, I was processing a lot of that A Path of Transformation. So Awakening the New You, A Path of Transformation. Actually, no, that was my 4th book. But
I got the list here if you need it.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's starting to, it's starting to get a little chobbled here. Yeah. But and plus the ones I'm working on inside of my head always, But it was that journey of forgiving myself for like the guilt I felt of why didn't I help her? There's so many people at this point. I've spoken to tens and tens of thousands of young people and some adults in different arenas, but I feel like in some ways I've been able to inspire and help people, but I couldn't help my own sister. And when that happened, it was like, all right, what can I learn from this? And really went on that process of learning and growing. And what I came to, like, what helped me have the most peace in it is sometimes the people we want to help the most, we can't. And we have to free ourselves from that obligation because of the way we want to help people. And ultimately, it has to be each individual deciding to help themselves. We can't carry that burden. So in coming to peace with that, it was like this mantra that I adopted into my life is, I couldn't help my sister, and there's many people I couldn't help that I would have loved to be able to help. Friends that have OD'd and friends that have ended up in prison, all different things that I would have loved to be able to give myself to their better well-being. But in that, I came up with the mantra is just to reach one is to reach them all, because we can't always help who we want. But if we reach one person, that's everyone to that person. And that's pretty much how I live my life and direct the focus of my passions with my writing and my work.
Great. I love that. Yeah. I have on my computer in my office a number of stickies that hopefully throughout the day, if I need one, I look at it, and that reminds me of don't let your inability to do everything stop you from doing something, some version of that. And you talk about skateboarding, like coming to grips with the fact that you're getting older and maybe everything's not there. Or, me with my weight, it's like, okay, maybe I'm not going to have shredded abs, but can I lose 20 pounds? We kind of have this all or nothing mentality that if we can't be exactly what we want or have exactly what we want or do exactly what we want, that we just don't want to do it at all. And there's that middle road of, even if we get halfway there, that's better than where we're, at currently. So kind of not quite as heavy as what you're talking about, but I definitely think that's a mental block that a lot of us have, is the inability to do exactly the thing that we want. Even in politics, inability to have exactly the person that we want. It's an unrealistic way of thinking. I wanted to ask you about your siblings a little bit, because you mentioned them. How are they doing? Are they kind of...
They're good. They're all... They all
here locally?
Yeah, they're here. And actually one lives in Michigan. But, it's... I'm proud of all of them in their own way for just getting through as much as they have to be where they are. I'm very fortunate in the sense that I think that I always had something to really pour myself into to help heal and to help grow as a person. Whereas I'm not sure they had those same things, the healthy outlets, like for me with skateboarding and other outlets and surfing and writing and my art, things of that nature that have been instrumental in me being where I'm at versus where I could have been.
Sure.
So, but they're doing good. There's always room for growth and improvement, but like I said, I'm proud of them all for just doing what they have done to at least get where they're at now.
In the book, you talk a bit about kind of the struggles that you had as a younger kid, whether it was poverty and having, the lights and the water turned off. As you mentioned, the issue with your father leaving and kind of how your mother weathered the storm of your father leaving and having all those children. How bad did it get for you personally? Like, what was kind of bottom?
got really bad. When
was there drugs? Was there any of that stuff?
I would say more. I think violence. I got into a place of where I started to hurt people, and really enjoy fighting. I looked for opportunities to engage physically with people and to hurt them. If there was any sort of confrontation or like a bad vibe I was getting from someone, I saw it as just a chance to fight.
Right.
And so I projected my pain and hurt on a lot of people, and then I had a lot of struggles internally. I got super depressed and suicidal, and when you're in your adolescence and everything that you see as what maybe relationships look like and reality is, and it's bad, and there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of drug abuse. It really starts to distort your understanding of what reality is, and then you see other people's families that are going on vacations and having Christmases and whatever that looks like, and you start to get all distorted of like thinking that maybe something is wrong with you. Am I doing this? Why is life this hard, kind of thing? And when you're in high school and you're literally getting a gallon of water from 7-Eleven down the street, waking up in the morning, run to the store, fill it up, come back, use that water to take a shower all before my friends got there, because you didn't want to be like, dude, we don't have water right now.
You don't want to be the smelly kid. You don't want to be the kid who doesn't have water. You don't want to,
it's like you're just, even when I knew my friends would back me and they would probably be like, dude, come over to my house and take a shower. It was a shame that you felt.
Sure, pride,
It almost like it's your fault, So that had a big impact on my mental health, and really just got me to the point where I was depressed and suicidal, and even flirting with taking my life multiple times with, gun in my mouth, just trembling on the trigger. And I would do the balance point with the trigger where it's like a revolver where you squeeze and then you pull.
Mm-hmm.
There's that little bit of play at the beginning, and then once it pulls, it clicks past. So I'd always I'd pull to the squeeze and see if I could feel that balance in between, and full on tears running down my eyes, just thinking I could just we're so close, just pull it, or like a knife, I would just have it into my throat and my palm behind the handle and pushing up to where it's full on piercing, and wanting to push so bad and feeling that. And, but before we go any further, but when it comes to conversations about suicide, I think it's important to acknowledge anyone that's listening to, if you're in that place, get help, talk to someone, reach out. There's always so many people that help you, because like you had mentioned earlier, therapy multiple times. It took me a long time to realize that it was okay to talk to people, and that there were so many people that loved and cared about me, So in talking about that, I always like to make that disclaimer.
No, it's true. I've had, George Wood and Chris Bryant and some other people who've been on the show have told me their stories similar to that. And, it's a tough thing. And, I've a member of my family, there was some conversation lately that was concerning. And I was just saying, where's the dividing line between thinking about it and actually thinking about it?
I tell you that there's a fine line there.
Once you talk about that balance point, there's a mental balance point.
Once you go down to you get into the mode of thinking about it, you're not far off from being able to do it.
Right.
I think it's important to talk about solutions in those situations. In my depression and my tendency to loop into darkness, or not tendency, but experience with going in that direction. And then you follow loops of like how bad you are, how many things are wrong. And then it loops and it keeps looping into other things. And that loop gets bigger. And next thing you know, you're thinking about how much you would have relief if you just take your life. And then that loop turns into, well, how would I do it? And I have this thing that I say is, I believe you master your mind or it masters you. And you have to catch those thoughts like as fast as you can before they start to take you down. When you wake up in the morning and you wake up and there's a dark shadow sitting over top of you, and you feel like you can't get out of bed and you just want to lay there because the blanket feels like it's 1,000 pounds. You have to challenge yourself to get up, go brush your teeth. That's all you need to do for the day.
Right.
When you brush your teeth, then your mind can start going into other things like, okay, let me take a shower, like anything to be productive. And I have very little needs in my life, but one of the things that I created earlier in my life is non-negotiables for my mental health, which is skateboarding and outlets like that. People on the outside may see it as like, oh, that's just some leisurely thing that you might do, but
self-care,
the self-care is non-negotiable for me. And I'm fortunate that I have people around me, especially my wife, that gets that and understands that, because she feels the same way about herself and she understands the importance of it. But I feel like as we become adults, we start to make these negotiations for ourselves to have these things as options when they're not options, not when it comes to your mental health. If I'm a big advocate for putting just as much attention on your mental health as you do any other area of health in your life.
Right. What was the turning point for you? Like, what was, you mentioned this, but like, obviously you're today, as you sit here, very compassionate, very empathetic, very heartfelt, very, philosophical, introspective, and all these things. Like, how did you make that transition? What got you to where you are now, besides skating? And was there therapy? Was there medication?
Stabbed.
Was there?
I got stabbed 9 times when I was 17, and laying in the hospital, almost dying, because thinking that all of a sudden I realized, wow, I don't want to die. Like, all these days that I spent on my life thinking that I could care less if I lived or died. Like, I didn't feel like life had anything to offer me. I didn't have anything to offer it necessarily. I didn't have a place in the world. So then all of a sudden feeling like, whoa, I don't want to die, because it was on that verge of death, and laying there with doctors and nurses all around me, and like seeing and feeling the potential of life passing, just being on that place of choice to be here or not is why I be kept here or why I be gone. And that just started that woke me up and started that really long road of figuring myself out and trying to ask more of myself. I felt like at that point, if I'm here, there's a choice for me to be here for whatever reason. I need to make the best out of it. And I need to use my life and experiences to impact and help others. So there's many things, over different times in my life. I had some guidance with therapists. I really there's so many things, man. I went on silent fast by myself in the woods and all kinds of I was just open to the journey of figuring myself out. Writing has been instrumental beyond just writing my books. The books are just small little manifestations of what writing has actually done for me.
Do you write every day?
Every day, pretty much. I try to at least 3 pages, every day. There's days I miss where I'm just kind of like I don't make myself do it, or not make myself, but I don't do it. I may be a little more like in my head and just miss a day, but that's pretty much, most every day.
What about reading?
Yeah. Reading has been, there's so many great books that I've read that have helped and just like kind of guiding me.
I don't see that there's much like faith-based aspect to this. Is there? Am I missing it? I was wondering.
There are other books that are more spiritual, not religious. I don't consider myself a religious person at all. Definitely a spiritual journey. So like there's more mention of, a higher power source, universe, whatever anyone wants to call it. And like my second, third, and fourth book, I think they're like more mention of it, but not religious or necessarily, I don't want to say not faith-based because I live my life just on faith of many different things.
Well, right. So this was a conversation that I was having with George Wood, and he was talking about the difference between faith and religion. And I was telling him, I don't consider myself to be a person of faith. I'm not religious. I grew up going to Catholic school. And I was raised Catholic, and my children are baptized Catholic. My daughter goes, but it was around the time my mom got diagnosed with cancer that I kind of lost any kind of that aspect of my life. And in doing that, I was a prosecutor over in Pinellas County and did criminal defense. So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people who have issues with substances, whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever else. And a lot of the programs out there have some component of, religion in it. And I was asking George, is there a road to salvation, a road to recovery that isn't a road of, religious faith? Like, can you do it as an agnostic or as an atheist? And, he had interesting answers about it. But that's one of the things that I noticed about your book is you kind of almost have faith in yourself, faith in what your abilities are. Not that you're not receiving help from outside of yourself, but you kind of invested in, you're pot committed in yourself and kind of, I'm going to be the best person that I can be, so at least that was my takeaway from it.
Yeah. And like, just, I think that's part of the, process of getting to a connection to any type of higher power or source, is really going inward and believe in yourself and your abilities, and the other things are revealed, and I think that everyone has their own way to whatever their greatest good is, or whatever you want to call it, understanding is. I think there's just so many different paths and directions that people can take, but I think ultimately the focus is just to be the best versions of ourselves, and I think that just starts to open up and blossom into so many other beautiful things and connections to whatever passions or causes or whatever anyone wants to call it, a higher power, if you will, God, source. It's that desire to grow,
right?
That takes us in great places, I believe.
You mentioned your wife. How long have you been married?
We will be together 5 years Thursday. Married like 3.
How'd you guys meet?
We actually met when we were younger.
Okay.
But at that stage, we're 8 years apart. So when we met when we were younger, I'm in my late 20s, and she was maybe 20 or something.
8 years is a big difference at the younger end. When you're in the older end, it kind of doesn't. Yeah.
So we reconnected later on. We hung out a few times back then. That was it. And then we both went and did our things.
Did she remember you pre-enlightenment?
I don't know. No, not really. I mean, it was like I was in, later 20s. I was in the business world at that point, but we didn't hang out enough to get to know each other then at all.
Well, let me ask you. You mentioned the business world. I want to because what I know of you are your books and your skating. What is your day to day? What is it that you do?
My day to day is my books. Before the COVID, you know, I had several initiatives going in and getting funding to get copies of my 5th book, Just for Youth, into young people's hands, middle school and high school primarily. Did a lot of talks in different capacities. And then I would also invite young people to be a part of this movement of valuing others that I started, that has been spread all around the world, really, through these little cards that say, you are valued. I see the value in who you are, pass it on the back. And it's just this ripple of kindness thing. But but the books have always been the foundation, and then talks and all of that stuff have like come from the books. It's just like a spread, but that's that's my day to day. That's the books is they're how I sustain and keep the dream alive.
Do you have any children?
One child. Yep.
How old?
He is 2 months and like a week or something. Newborn.
You're in it.
Yeah.
How's your sleep going?
It's getting there. Yeah. It's definitely, it's the first few weeks are brutal.
Yeah.
It's baby boot camp is what my wife and I have been saying.
They talk about when you have your first one that like the moms are in love because they're in the womb, and it takes the dad a little bit for it to click. I can't remember if that's exactly how I felt, but there is a point around 6 months when you pick up little personality traits that all of a sudden they really like have you by the heart. But one thing that has promoted my rigid attendance at therapy is how my upbringing impacts how I want my kids to be raised, how I want my relationship with my wife to be. And do you think about your parents' relationship at all when you're thinking about you and your wife? Do you think about your parents at all when you're thinking about your son?
Yeah. And real quick to go back to the day-to-day, that was a leap of faith. That's a whole nother conversation. But I was in the business world for 10 years.
What was the business? That's what I was asking.
That I was in the car business.
Okay.
And I was working with youth when I was younger. I got this opportunity. I bought a car from this guy. I became really good friends with him. It's quick. It's long, but eventually became
like car sales.
Became sales manager for his dealership. That kind of took over everything. We partnered. Then I was in contract to buy the business from him.
Oh my God.
I was well committed, over $1 million on like a 20-year lease, like a 10 to like couple 5-year renewals, and buying his inventory, several $100,000 of inventory. Wrote my second book, What Really Matters. At that point, I had known from growing up poor, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go help these young people and do this thing. And then I got this opportunity. I started to see money and the opportunity to make real money. Not saying any money is not real, but like significant money. And I all of a sudden just got this feeling that if I made a lot of money, I would be happy and my life would be perfect and all of this stuff would be great. Everything that all of my pain and all my struggles from youth were because we were so poor.
Right.
And of course the dysfunction, but I was caught up in this idea, illusion, I should say. And after I wrote my second book, What Really Matters, I was assessing, because I had multiple people that I knew that were worth millions of dollars that passed away randomly. And then some close friends I knew passed away. And now it's another friend that got murdered at a young age. And so I started to look at, and of course, my own experience with near death, started to look at like where all of these people were and what their life was like, and then ask myself what really matters in the midst of all of this stuff. Like at the end of it all, what really matters ultimately. And after I finished the book, all of a sudden I was getting all these conflicting feelings. I had just contracted within the last year to buy this, I was buying the business. It was in my name. Everything was going in that direction. I was like, I had one rental property and I was buying another one, and I like had this like map to have a certain amount of properties at a certain age, and all this like map to become millionaire, basically. After I wrote that book, I was looking at my life and seeing how I was living it, and realized that it wasn't right. It wasn't what I felt in my heart I wanted to do. It was just something I thought I should do from society's pressure and like things I was trying to identify with that weren't true to who I am. And basically just walked away, dissolved my business agreements and lost everything in terms of financial growth and sustainability that I built up. At that point, I had to let it go to keep moving.
Were you married at that point?
No.
Were you guys together?
No.
Okay.
No, that was when I was 30, roughly. Like 27, 28 is when What Really Matters came out. And that was like the process of fully dismantling that whole system. And then I did a little auto broker things. I had a lot of clients just to keep it going. And then at some point, I realized I had to cut the cords completely. And then
that's a big leap.
Yeah, man. And eventually I started working at this organization for a couple years, the domestic violence agency. I was a youth advocate.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, again, I was like, this isn't right. I need to be fully invested in me and like what my work is and what I want to share, my books and my focus is, so I left that, and my directors were so great and supportive, but they were like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? I have no idea. I just know I have to go. If I don't, I will always regret that I didn't go all in on my own dreams. And I left.
Were you skating during this time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
At that time I was really like heavy in surfing. I was able to surf a lot and go on some trips and stuff, which was awesome. But then when I did that, and like 2 weeks after that was a huge leap, because there was no guarantee of any money or anything. Like I need to do like some talks to get paid. I don't know. I need to sell books. It was like 1 or 2 weeks after I got an email from some the like program inside of Pinellas County Schools that wanted to buy. It was maybe like 1,000 copies of my first book. So it was just, and since then it has been random things and opportunities and bulk book sales that have just kept me going.
That's amazing.
And it sounds like easy and amazing, but of course that comes with a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I've been to the point where I had, before my wife and I were together, I was to the point where I had $37 in my name. I was letting go the last piece of property that I had to find a place to live, didn't have a clue where I was going to live, and then just something worked out.
Do you think having experienced that as a younger kid made you less afraid of being there, or more afraid of being there? Like if you've been through it, it's maybe, I guess it could go one of either way. It could be, well, I've been there, I know I can do it again, or I never want to go back there. Like, did you think of it? And
there is always that the opposite side of the spectrum. Of course, there's that the biggest draw is I never want to be poor, want to go back there when I was like, I need to make money. And when I left, it wasn't about money or anything like that, or I didn't think so much about if I had to struggle that I was going back to poverty. It was that I was doing it for my dreams.
Right.
So there's a difference of because poverty goes much deeper than just the material possessions that we have. Because if I was at a place in my childhood that we didn't have anything and power was turned off, we were getting food after our food assistants would around get food from churches or whatever, and no water, in very minimal and material things at all back then. If I had love and support and I felt good about who I was, and esteem and self-esteem and things like that, it wouldn't have been poverty so much. It would have just been lack of certain material things. So there was that push to get away from it. Then as I got older and realized the importance of following my passion and my dreams, times that I've gotten really down financially and struggled, it didn't feel like I was going back to my, like the cycles I was born. It was just felt like it was part of the journey to get to where I'm going in terms of realizing my like potential and my dreams,
So we were talking a little bit on social media privately about we were talking about kind of your routine with skating, and you said, I wear the same thing to the park every day and all this other stuff. And we were having discussions about, a minimalist kind of way of conducting your life. And you mentioned some story in your life that kind of led to that. Is that what we're talking about right now? Or
Yeah. When I left the car lot, I just looked at all this stuff I acquired, and half of it I had I could care less about any of it. So, I started going through a phase of letting go of things little by little, and, got to the point where I really just had very minimal in my house, and I liked it. It was very freeing, and I enjoyed the feeling, and then I try to keep things to a minimum in terms of the things that I buy and get. It's just, I don't. I had a lot of things in different cars and stuff like that I thought would satisfy me or give me some sort of fulfillment, and the fulfillment was so short-lived that it was almost mind-blowing sometimes of so much ideas that you put into some material thing, and then you get here and you're like, oh, okay, cool. So
that's a problem I have. We were talking about that too. And then this is one of the things that I talk with a therapist a lot about is intellectually understanding something, but being actually able to practice what you intellectually understand. Like, I know how to lose weight. I know what a good diet is. Why don't I do it? Or I know I don't need all these sneakers, but why, I know intellectually the right way, but getting yourself to actually go down that path is an interesting battle at least for me.
And it's the thing, what you were saying, it's like we get caught up in the extremes of all or nothing type thing. But, in something simple like diet or not having 20 pairs of shoes, it's like, okay, slow modifications, little by little.
Micro abrasions.
That's where I think that's where sustainable change happens with any habits that we're trying to create for ourselves. It's like, okay, so instead of 20, let me just bring it down to 15 or maybe 18 or whatever. If I'm trying to adjust my diet, instead of, and I'm just using this as a large sample, instead of having 3 sodas a day and whatever, like fast food twice, just do it once and have 1 soda a day and like slowly modify. It's that's, and I'm always, I always try to look at different areas that I can modify my life, and it's always a work in progress. In terms of like the material things, and this is not to say there's anything wrong with people who have a lot of things and want a lot of things. I get it. There's a lot, there are many awesome things out there to acquire and have and enjoy momentarily, the newness of it or whatever. It's just something for me personally. And also when I was adjusting my lifestyle and focusing on like my books and my passion and things like that, those things were necessary. I had to strategize and set my life up strategically to be able to halfway sustain. I went from a point of driving Lexus or whatever car that I wanted, like looking out at a dealership of 35, 40 cars at sometimes, and that like pick whatever, to not having a car, having a scooter for an extended period of time, and then eventually getting like an 87 Honda Accord vintage that I had, but willing to make those sacrifices to pursue what I am.
Well, this is an important point, and it's hard for me because I don't always want to talk about things where I don't necessarily practice what I preach. But one of the things that has become more clear to me as I get older is that the price of things is not just what's on the tag. It's the time from your existence that you have to devote to sustain or maintain those things.
You're exchanging time for whatever you have.
And that's time you're taking away from your son skating, your wife, your own self-care, the more of that you're holding on your shoulders, the less you have to give to the things that are actually important and actually meaningful. So I have to try and think of it in that way sometimes. And it's hard because there's, only 24 hours in a day, only 7 days in a week. What are you going to do with that time?
Yep.
So the price of things and also encumbering yourself, I think there's this drive for especially young people to encumber themselves. They need to have a car. They need to have a mortgage. They need to have a wife. They need to have kids. And I'm not saying that wife and kids are encumbrances, but there's certain things that kind of, once you cross that threshold, it's very difficult to, not to look back, know? So you got to make sure when you're doing these things that you know what you're doing and you're pot committed and ready to go forward with it because, we're talking about your dad's stuff. I mean, I'm primarily practice family law, so I see what happens with the family unit and the impact that these things have on the children. And, you're talking about your experiences. There's all this literature these days about not even just kids of families with domestic violence, but just of toxic communications between the parents, what impact that has on children. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last week, and we were talking about infidelity. And I was saying to him, people, whatever their view is on it, it's a horrible thing to do to a person. But when there's children involved, the imprint that you're putting on those kids and what their view of trust is, what their view of loyalty is, what their view of family is, what their view of love is, what their view of intimacy is, you are changing those things.
It's devastating.
Sometimes permanently. And not only that, but your spouse is their mom or their dad. So you're doing something to their parent. It's an affront on your child as much as it is on your spouse. And it's always amazing to me when I have these cases and I see this going on. I'm like, if you really unpack that bag and look at what it is you're doing, it's far worse than you can even conceive of, So, in any event, it's kind of a tangent, but
that actually brings it full circle back to what you were asking about me having a kid, and that do I think about that with my wife and my kid and what my home life was? Absolutely. It's like my sixth book is Healing the Wounded Child Within, and that was a journey that I was going on and realizing as I got older, I acquired skill sets and things that I'd learned along the way from personal development. And, I studied human development and psychology, child development when I was younger, and then human development later on in school. So I was doing it really studying myself and my own psyche and things of that nature. So when I was going through that journey to heal I had these skill sets, but I realized there were still wounds that I hadn't healed that, if triggered, would manifest into behaviors in my life. And so I went down and really just got deeper than I had in the past to kind of pluck away at that stuff and heal those wounds that have been sort of managed, I should say, not fixed. And but when our child was born, it triggered a lot of stuff that I had to deal with, that anxiety of not wanting to let him down and not wanting, and although I have it embedded in my mind, not repeating cycles, but just wanting to be better, wanting to be there unconditionally for my son, and beyond childhood stuff of just that feeling of wanting to give him any edge that I can based on how I, treat him and care for him and interact and engage. So it was, it's like stuff that I'm very acutely aware of, and making sure that because what a mentor and dear friend and important person in my life talked to me about was, as your child is going through different stages of development, they may trigger some childhood stuff that you had in those similar stages of development that you wouldn't have known before. So like if maybe your biggest trauma as a young person was in your teenage years, when your child is a teenager, it's going to trigger a lot of those old trauma things in you. So
that's interesting.
And I haven't really thought about that before. So I'm being really aware, of things that may be triggering in me.
It is good to be vigilant. One of the guests that we had on the show, he was talking about people with porn addiction and how people that get past porn addiction, when they try and re-enter a world of intimacy with their significant other, a lot of times that's going to trigger in them a lot of doubt and guilt and wonder about, how they feel in that moment versus how their perception of sex was and all these other things. And so it's the point that you're making, I think, is an interesting one, is that, we grow, we can get healthy, we can get perspective in life, but we do have to be vigilant that there's going to be maybe, I don't know if it's setbacks, but you're going to be tested.
Yeah.
And you have to know that that's coming and be okay with that and know that you might fall down, but can get back up and these sorts of things. So that's interesting.
And being kind to yourself,
that's a big one too. Yeah,
we're all just trying to figure it out, man. Like we started this off. Life's crazy. It's a wild ride, and sometimes are harder than others. And I think that it's a very slippery slope when we start getting super hard on ourselves and shaming ourselves and getting lost in the idea of regret, because it just perpetuates into a lot of unnecessary harm to ourselves. It's, if things happen, you make mistakes, you do something wrong, you have to accept it, learn and grow from it, and know that we're all human, just trying to get through this the best we can.
Well, that's a great transition to your book. So maybe we can kind of lighten it up and talk about skateboarding a little bit. So do you remember how you got into it? Was it a brother? Was it a friend? Was it
someone? I just remember my older brother skateboarded. He had some friends that skateboarded, and somewhere along the line, one of them let me use their board or let me borrow or have an old board.
You were doing BMX racing a lot.
I was really heavy into BMX.
Now, wasn't there a track that was out there by Tyrone Mall? Wasn't that the big?
Of them.
Yeah,
yep.
I remember. I never. I mean, I had the BMX bike, but I never got into the racing part. But I remember that was out there and thinking that was pretty cool. Watched Rad 9 million times.
Yeah, it was a great one. Yeah, I was fortunate. There was a friend of mine that I'm still friends with to this day. His father made his living from the way he made his living is from taking photos at BMX races.
Okay.
And then sell, like he would take the photos, get them developed, the photos developed at the first day of the race and have them for sale the second day of the race or whatever. But he would travel around all over to races, and I got to ride with them to races, which was very fortunate.
That's awesome.
So I got to race around the country.
So at some point along the way, someone introduced a board into your life, and then that kind of stole you away from the BMX world.
Man, I would start bringing my board to races, and then it got to the point where I almost missed a big race. I was at a national race and almost missed my moto that they call them because I was in the parking lot skating.
Yeah.
And I remember one weekend, because I would race Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to get my points for the national circuit, different tracks over the weekend. And one weekend, I just told the guy that I would go with that I'm not racing. I'm just gonna stay home and skate. And I skated all weekend and absolutely loved it. And that was it. I was done.
Yeah.
I just knew the only thing I wanted to do is skate as much as I could, whenever I could. If it was raining, I wanted to find a small square of dry spot somewhere just to skate, and that became it.
Right. There's this concept that I always kind of visit in my thinking on skating. And, as I become a responsible adult, and I have different views on things, I still go back to where my mind was at skating. And here's the example I'll give. I'll be in a city, a brand new building, and they have these rails and they weld the knobs on them, or you have these little, hubbas or whatever. And I understand these as landowners, as building owners, they want to protect their property.
Yeah.
But there's something I feel beautiful about skating. It's almost this yin and this yang between civilization and like a primal way of exploring yourself or kind of art, I guess, as it were. And so I had this struggle in my mind. I understand why, city councils don't want people skating on these benches. And I understand why but at the same time, I'm like, you need both sides to it. And there's something very uplifting to me about, you talk about in the book, those stairs, I'm gonna beat those stairs, or that ledge, I'm gonna beat that ledge, or this whatever. It's this kind of struggle that I think is beautiful. And so the responsible part of me versus the kind of more primal part of me are always kind of going back and forth on what I think about these things. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah, I could definitely see
you
that.
watch a lot of these videos, and there's always a part of the video where the security guard is like stealing some guy's skateboard or running people off. And it's like, where do I land on that? Like, I'd like to think I'm the kids who are like, live hard and get that trick. But, I probably will be the guy yelling at some kids for skating my curbs or whatever. So it's,
it's hard because you have to respect. I don't really skate a whole lot of street.
Well, luckily the parks now make it a little bit easier to.
Parks. And but I appreciate that conflict, because you have to respect the business owners and what their properties need to look like to stay valuable or whatever. And I think that many skateboarders do. They appreciate it, and but at the same time, they see something, and it's just something you have to do. They want to skate, but it's it's never out of a
malice
or disrespect. It's out of getting something or being able to express themselves in a way that they can maybe that they're only doing through skateboarding, or one of the ways they express themselves, and also the outlet aspect of it in the sense of conquering a trick, overcoming the challenges in your mind to get past and through a battle. But when it comes specifically to street sports, that's part of the when I skated more street, that we never wanted to be mean to anyone or
no, sure, yeah.
But
I didn't mean to paint it that way.
No, not at all. You didn't paint that way. I'm just saying, but it was just that you had to do it. It was like it's just this thirst for something, and then there's nothing like. The parks are great, and I love them. That's primarily where I skate. But there's nothing like Raw Street. There's nothing like just. It's because you have so many different elements involved on the streets that you're just working with whatever you have and getting a trick out of it.
My skate hero has always been the Gons. Like, he's always been my favorite because he's like a mix of Willy Wonka, Salvador Dali, Gene Wilder. Like he has these crazy boards and he rides stuff that no one else rides, like not because they're difficult, but just because no one would even think that you could do anything. And he's always got these weird tricks that he's pulling off. But you mentioned in the book, and I really loved it, and it's true. If you skate now or you've ever skated for any period of time, you do look at the world differently. And I was looking. There's a poster up there for the movie They Live. Did you ever see the movie They Live with Roddy Piper, where the aliens came? You had if you wore the glasses, you could see that the people were aliens, but if you took the glasses off, everybody just looked like humans.
I didn't see that.
You never seen that movie?
No.
Oh, you
all right, I'll get it.
Well, anyway, with if you skated.
I love this studio, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So awesome.
Yeah, this is my little little interpretation of my inner conscience. But as a skater, you're looking at every curb, you're looking at every parking stop, you're looking at every rail, every bench, every wall, every staircase. And even to this day, you know, I'm way overweight. I got 2 kids walking around with my wife, and I'm like, God, that would be rad right there, you know, to hit that and, you know, whatever else. So it's funny. That never goes away. You always think in those terms.
Yeah. And think about how beautiful and powerful that is to do something, fall in love with something that leaves an impression on you forever, whether you still do it or not. And it changes your perspective on the world.
Right.
Like you'll be 7 years old getting around however you are or whatever. I'm hoping to still be pushing, honestly, cruising, whatever I might be doing. But seeing things like that and in your mind thinking, what's possible down them, or it's just, or seeing them as that, as more of a obstacle to skate versus a part of a building. And going back to the street stuff and the buildings, is I think that's what it is it's not that skateboarders see it as a part of this business or whatever. They see it as something to do their art on and with, you know. So and that's I love that of just knowing that that's always there,
right?
You know, and you can drive around and you're always looking at stuff through the eyes of a skateboarder.
How cool. Are you getting in hours every day?
My goal is 4 to 5 days a week. Sometimes it's a little more. Is usually how I carve out time to be able to at least skate those. And some days the sessions are much longer than others.
Because everybody, are you pretty much always at that one park, right?
No, we switch it up, you know, and but yeah, that park when it opened, it was just. The team Payne did such a phenomenal job talking about the St. Pete skate park, and it just has everything.
Because there was one in Fossil Park for a minute, wasn't there?
Yeah, they're still there. Still there. I skated that a lot in my like 20s, mid-20s and stuff. That was when it first opened.
Where's this park? I have never been there.
By Campbell, right behind Campbell Park Elementary.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Where else do you skate?
I like the Gulfport Park a lot. Holmes Beach has a great one.
Sure.
I went to Apollo Beach this past weekend, Jackson Springs, all the parks.
You ever get over the Bro Bowl?
Yeah.
That's not called that anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, that's that Larry was Harvey just something. It's kind of, I went there a lot when I was younger for the original one.
Yeah.
Like really way back when it was wild, you know.
Yeah.
Wild there. But it was it's hard to go sometimes to other parks when one of the, like, I really like the St. Pete Park. And so
does everybody
close.
know you there? Like, are you kind of the regulars anyway?
I mean, yeah, there's like a whole morning crew of people that, because we go in the mornings most of the time.
Right.
And everyone's really awesome with each other, and it's just those guys and some of the female skaters that go out there as well hype me up so much. You know,
that's a really kind of I don't know that it's a new thing, but I'm noticing it more. Is there's a lot more female skaters at the skate park than I remember when I was a kid skating.
Yeah, we had, when we were in high school and stuff, there were girls definitely interested in it, but very few actually like wanted to do it.
Sure.
Or now there's so many females that are doing it, you know, which is amazing. I love it. And, you know, just to speak to the inclusiveness of skateboarding, you asked if everyone knows me at the park, whether people know me or not, or I know them or not. It's people are just respected when they show up. If you're being respectful and kind of, you know, being mindful of how you're skating and not just getting in front of people or snaking people or whatever, it's generally speaking a friendly vibe and welcoming vibe, which I always appreciate and love about skateboarding.
Right. You got any tricks that you're working on now?
Yeah. I always have 3 or 4 in my head that I want to do new ones. Yeah. I'm always pushing to get a couple new tricks, because that's where, you know, I try to keep it progressing and not get comfortable. For the last few years, there've been a lot of relearning old tricks that I used to be able to do and trying to get stuff down and feel solid again. And now it's, I'm always thinking of some that I want to do.
How's the body holding up?
Good. It's man, it's harsh, but I do a lot of like cross stuff.
I was going to ask about that. Like, do you have a routine outside of skating?
Yeah, I do yoga, stretching, whatever you want to call it. I call it yoga because I actually like work on breath work and meditation and things of that nature. But I have a consistent practice of that I do that I counterbalance with skateboarding. I get acupuncture on a regular basis. I have like CBD bombs and Tiger Balm and things that I do, and then like some calisthenic stuff too, just to try to help like my core to stay up. But some of those get exercises outside of skateboarding get compromised from injuries all the time.
Right.
Like my wrists are always bummed a little bit, so that messes up some of the game. But I'm always doing some yoga and stretching and things just to offset the impact.
And your wife is supportive of it? She's cool with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. She knows it makes me a better person all around to be able to do it. And, it's just, there's so many positive aspects to
That's always a struggle I have, is feeling guilty about taking time for myself away from my... And it's healthy what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're at a place that I'd like to get to, but just intellectually or psychologically, that's something that I'm always,
Well, I mean, and she, I encourage her time too, and we both surf together and stuff. So she gets it. She understands, and she's an artist, and she
what type of artist.
She has a tattoo studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In downtown Gulfport.
Oh, very cool.
Mother Ocean. She's amazing, and so she gets that balance, but it's conflicting, man. I won't like to give you an example. When our son was born, like she had a very intense labor. We went from like a birth center, had to get transferred to the hospital and like stay there for 2 days because it was just a delayed labor. She had over 40-hour labor. It was super intense.
Oh my God.
So the whole experience, like being up the first 24 hours straight, then getting a little bit of nap, and then in the hospital, you're not really sleeping. But coming out of that, we were coming home and transitioning home, and like the next day, it was intellectually I needed to just stay here for this morning and kind of just like, I want to be a great husband. I want to be a solid figure in my son's life, just for him to feel me there always, but at the same time, I knew that if I didn't go skate for a few hours, then I'm not going to be good. My head's not going to be good.
Yeah.
I'm going to start like getting anxiety and depressed and things like that. I was already dealing with postpartum depression right away. I actually dealt with it before labor, earlier phases of it. So I knew it had to be what it is, and my wife fully supported that because she understands. And it's back to you saying intellectually, we get that social pressure in society, generally speaking, of feeling selfish if we do things that take care of ourselves. But I actually believe it's selfless, when you commit to taking care of yourself, because you set yourself. You're more set up to be better for everyone around you.
Right.
So it's not always easy. Like I said, in my mind, I'm like,
it's that middle road.
Yeah. You think of it intellectually, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't really go skate today, or I shouldn't go play the guitar, or shouldn't do this thing that helps me stay fulfilled and happy and inspired, because I could be doing these other things, which ultimately is other things for other people, which is beautiful. And I live a selfless life to the biggest part, to the biggest extent. But I also know if don't have those times of taking care of myself, I'm not going to do any good.
Now, you mentioned art, your art, and I don't know if you were referring to skateboarding or if there's some other aspect of art in your life.
I like to draw.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, that's something that the three pillars of my survival as a young person dealing with paralyzed and depression, sometimes anxiety and violence and things like that was like pencil art, color pencils, graphite, journaling, and skateboarding.
Do those exist anywhere in the world to see, or are those just for you, your drawings?
No, I share them. I post them on
maybe an
social
art
media
book at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I've only sold a couple. I just decided, like, there were a few that I decided to sell, but there's parts of me I wish I kind of just kept them, because there's the pieces I've been working on the last several years is a series of Agents of Change. I did Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela. I'm working on Dalai Lama now. I did Gandhi.
Oh wow!
I did. I'm going blank on her name. The young advocate for education and female, and I think Iraq, Iran. Mandala, and what's her name? Starts with an M.
I'll have to think about it. You can post-production it in.
Yeah,
I'll put it in editor's note.
I'm going blank, but that's the one I sold.
Has your wife ever tattooed any of your pieces?
Yeah, my arm. She did.
No, tattooed something that you drew.
Oh no! Just once she did it. She did it.
That's very cool. So before you go, I know you said you had to get out of here by 10:30. I think. Your newest book is Thank You Skateboarding, but do you have any more that are coming out in the short term? I mean, are you getting close?
Nothing soon. Yeah, okay. It's I've really been trying to put my time into giving Thank You Skateboarding its space and grow and develop to continue to get momentum and share it. It's the response has been great so far. It's a great
book. I love it. I want my kids to read it. I was thinking awesome. I want to grab some copies to give to clients who are going through struggles, because I visually, people always think like they want to talk football with me or they want to talk whatever because I'm a bigger guy and whatever else. But it's funny because I would rather talk skateboarding, or I would rather talk art, or I'd rather talk all these other things. And skateboarding for me, even though I don't get to do it as much now as I used to, is just such a beautiful thing, because you can do it by yourself. You can do it with a bunch of people. It's a mixture of sport, art, health. I mean, it's really, and not only that with surfing, which is great, but you got to live near a body of water that has waves.
It's work to surf.
Yeah. With skating, you can do it anywhere. Yeah. It's just such an awesome thing that, as you mentioned, was a part of my life that has benefited my life, even if I'm not doing it regularly today. One of my big things is music. I love music. Music is like my passion. And even today, like I'm addicted to watching skate videos, and I get introduced to so much new, awesome music through skate videos. Like they're always on the cutting edge. I don't know. Did you see the Stay Gold video, the America video?
Yeah.
That soundtrack is so good. I made a playlist of that soundtrack and I still listen to it today. So it's given me so much, and I'm hoping it's something that my kids take to. My cousin has been taking his daughter to skate park at Tampa, Brian Schaefer's place, and she's loving it and she's shredding. It's awesome to see. So it's so good. Where can people find your stuff? Where can people find you online? Like, how can I promote you?
The best place to get the book is Thank You Skateboarding is Amazon. Any of the books, really, they're available. Thank You Skateboarding is available any like online bookseller if you have a preference. Amazon, just kind of like the agreements with them work out the best, honestly. Sure. Anywhere at social media, Ricky Roberts with a Y, the third.
I know you put a lot of your skate videos on Facebook. Skate clips
on Instagram.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
Too. No. Okay. I do. Like I'm not active. I just do like a yearly, like 42 for 42 tricks. Like there's some old stuff on there. But yeah, and then so anywhere social media, Ricky Roberts III, Ricky with a Y, and just in that what you were saying, and I know we're wrapping up, but the skateboarding and making the time for it, you're talking about that. I just encourage anyone, if they're older and they used to skate and you're like, I don't have a lot of time for it, even if you make one day where you're like, this is my day to go skate for a few hours, go to one of the parks in the morning. You're going to meet people that are going to be supportive and cool and encourage you. Forget about what you used to be able to do or where you once were in your prime. Just gauge your progression off of where you start. If you can only like ride across the park, start there. Drop in on a quarter pipe eventually, or whatever. Start slow. Just get that feeling of the board rolling under you, and it can do nothing but good.
I can't thank you enough for making the drive over here today. I've been loving everything that you're doing online. I really enjoyed your book. I think you're just an amazing, positive person, and I think it's pretty cool what you're doing for other people. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming over.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me.
All right,
appreciate
care.
it.